Beyond the gates, spoilers tease that in the twilight of a life bound by secrets, a whisper traverses the hospital's sterile corridors, promising a hope more powerful than any medicine could muster. Hayley, cheeks flushed with anticipation, stands by the window of Bill's private recovery suite, fingers trembling as she steadies herself against the intravenous pull. Outside, autumn leaves drift against the glass, their crimson hues echoing the tumult within her heart. Each breath brings the weight of the world, for she carries within her a fragile life whose beating heart mirrors the uncertainties of her own. Yet in that moment, she is radiant with possibility, intoxicated by the promise of new beginnings even as shadows of doubt stretch long across the threshold of their shared future. Bill lies propped upon satin pillows, pale and gaunt from surgery and endless nights of vigil. His chest rises uncertainly beneath crisp white linen, the rhythmic beep of machinery marking each precious moment of life. When Hayley approaches, she places a hand on his arm, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath his gown. Her voice catches as she leans close, breath soft with excitement. "There's a heartbeat," she whispers, eyes shining. "We're going to have a baby." In the hush that follows, the steady hum of hospital life seems to pause, as if waiting to see what will come next. Bill's gaze, bloodshot but clear, drifts upward. A flicker of hope ignites, and for the first time since the accident, his lips lift in a genuine smile. Yet not all hearts are quick to believe in the miracle unfolding. Dani, Bill's first love and the mother of his only daughter, stands beyond the doorway's threshold, arms folded across sheer sleeves. A nurse's glare pushes her back, reminding her that this is private space, sacred in its vulnerability. Dani hovers at the edges of the hall like a wisp of smoke present, yet uninvited. The news of Hayley's pregnancy reached her before she could process its implications, and her mind whirls with suspicion. How easily one might craft a lie to bind a man to them, to keep his affections from wandering where they no longer belong. "You don't get a third chance," she reminds herself, yet fear gnaws at her resolve. What if this new life is a gambit, a ruse to erase memories of the past? In the days that follow, Dani's disbelief hardens into conviction. She contacts Naomi, their daughter, whose own loyalty teeters between love for her father and a residual resentment toward Hayley. Naomi arrives at the Hamilton residence beneath a sky bruised by rain, the weight of her mother's concern heavy in her heart. Together, they pore over every available scrap of evidence: medical documents, ultrasound photos printed on glossy paper, the faint heartbeat captured on a recording. They retrace Hayley's steps, appointments at obscure clinics, hushed conversations with physicians. Each detail they uncover seems meticulously orchestrated, as if choreographed to ensnare Bill's vulnerability. To Dani, the more perfect the tale, the more dangerous the deceit. Naomi, her brow furrowed with both teenage confidence and the uncertainty of youth, spearheads the digital forensics. She scans appointment logs, timestamps, credit card statements. When she finds discrepancies, payments made to a fertility clinic in a city miles away, despite Hayley's insistence that she never travel, alarm bells ring in her mind. She traces Hayley's phone records, noting calls to an unfamiliar number at odd hours. The number leads to a temporary prepaid phone, impossible to trace. Each discovery spawns a new question: who is Hayley really working with? Is there a co-conspirator? Or is the lie hers alone to bear, designed to rewrite Bill's life and cast history aside? Back at the hospital, Bill's condition fluctuates. One day, he is lucid and hopeful. The next, a fever steals his strength, leaving him weak and disoriented. Hayley remains his steadfast guardian, brushing his hair from his forehead, whispering encouragements when his spirit flickers. She researches childbirth, prenatal care, nursery designs. She paints a vision of their future in vivid hues: a cradle by the window, morning laughter echoing through the halls, the soft coo of an infant whose existence will bind them irrevocably. Her devotion seems boundless, A guiding light in Bill's dark hours, yet every heartfelt promise Dani interprets as another stitch in a tapestry of deception. Driven by maternal instinct, Dani secures a meeting with Dr. Alvarez, the obstetrician whose name appears on Hayley's ultrasound. In the bright confines of his office, they present themselves as long-lost relatives seeking clarity. Alvarez, a man burdened by patient confidentiality, deflects their inquiries with apologetic professionalism, refusing to breach the sacred trust between doctor and patient. Still, his manner betrays unease. His evasive eyes suggest deeper complications. Yen thumbs the reverent silence, convinced that even the doctor senses something amiss. As they leave, she catches his name scribbled on a folder, females only IVF, and Dani's heart pounds. Was she never truly pregnant? Or is there a darker secret buried beneath sanitized medical records? Meanwhile, laughter and lightness creep into Bill's recovery suite as Hayley convenes with nurses, eager to capture precious moments. A photographer visits to document the pregnancy, framing Hayley's glowing silhouette against the sterile backdrop. Each image is shared discreetly with friends, garnering congratulatory smiles and heart emojis. The digital outpouring of support cements the narrative in the public eye. Bill beams as he pores over the photos, his damaged body momentarily forgotten. Yet, behind Hayley's eyes, a flicker of fear betrays the careful mask she wears. In the privacy of her own thoughts, the lie looms like a storm cloud imminent, inevitable. As hospital visitors bring cupcakes, flowers, and soft toys, Dani and Naomi watch from the shadows. They witness Hayley's seamless performance, the gentle touch, the glowing anticipation. At the same time, Naomi notices inconsistencies: the makeup smudged at the corners of Hayley's eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she anchors her resolve. She records snippets of conversations, capturing Hayley's nervous laughter when questioned by well-meaning coworkers. One voice memo freezes in Naomi's grip, Hayley muttering, "It's only a matter of time." Time to what? To Bill's realization? To her own reckoning? The day of reckoning arrives when Dani covertly obtains a court order to access Hayley's medical records. In the sterile light of the courthouse, she scans the official transcripts. No record of pregnancy tests. No ultrasound reports. The folder is almost empty, filed under "in progress," as though everything hinged on Hayley's declarations rather than documented fact. Her hand trembles as she lifts the folder, the weight of revelation pressing into her chest. "We have what we need," she says softly to Naomi, voice steadied by righteous anger and sorrow. They retreat into the rain-soaked streets, paper evidence clutched between them like a weapon. Confrontation cannot be delayed. Under a slate-gray sky, the two women storm the hospital corridors, ivy vines of dread coiling around Bill's fragile hope. They burst into his suite without ceremony, files in hand. Bill, propped up in bed, looks between them, confusion clouding his features. "What's happening?" he asks. Hayley, her composure slipping, drops a handkerchief to the floor, her eyes widening with panic. Dani spreads the records on the bedside table, each sheet a dagger, unverified claims, blank forms, suspicious omissions. Naomi stands poised, evidence laid bare. "This is your pregnancy?" Dani demands, voice echoing off tiled walls. "Is this your greatest lie?" In the charged silence that follows, Bill's face drains of color. His pulse races, each beat hammering against ribs weakened by illness. He grabs Hayley's hand, searching her eyes for truth, for love. Instead, he finds betrayal. "How could you?" he whispers, voice raw with pain. Hayley's lips tremble as she searches for words. The truth lies locked behind her fear of abandonment, fear that without this child, Bill's heart would return to Dani and Naomi. She tries to explain, but her voice falters, drowned by the crescendo of Bill's heartbreak. The line between life and death, hope and despair, blurs in the sterile glow of the room. Anger floods Bill in hot waves, each one crashing harder than the last. He shoves the sheets aside and tries to stand, legs betraying him as they buckle beneath resolve. "You lied to me," he says, each word a blow. "You used our future as a weapon." Hayley staggers back, eyes glistening with tears. In that moment, their marriage, already tested by tragedy, falters on the brink. The promise of new life becomes a battleground for fractured trust. Outside the door, Dani watches, heart both heavy and vindicated, knowing that in exposing Hayley's deception, she risks pushing Bill further from them both. Silence descends as Hayley drops to her knees beside the bed, torn between remorse and desperation. Bill closes his eyes, pressing a hand to his forehead, as if to banish the ache that her lie has carved into his soul. Naomi, witnessing her family's unraveling, feels guilt prick her conscience. The truth may save Bill from deceit, but it might also destroy the fragile threads binding them. Dani places a steady hand on Naomi's shoulder, both comfort and caution in her touch. The future lies suspended, a fragile heartbeat waiting to be measured. In the hush of that room, beyond the gates of certainty, they stand at the threshold of irrevocable change, uncertain whether forgiveness can ever bridge the chasm that Hayley's lie has created. Silence clung to the hospital room long after the echoes of accusation had faded. Bill's breaths came in shallow, uneven waves beneath the white sheets, as though each inhale weighed upon him like a stone. Far too quickly, the cacophony of monitors and hushed footsteps beyond the curtain drifted into the background, leaving only the hollow ache in his chest. He stared at the ceiling, where sterile tiles stretched endlessly, attempting to comprehend how the promise of new life had collapsed into betrayal. Hayley knelt at his side, face buried in her hands, shoulders convulsing with sobs that no longer sought forgiveness, but instead begged for release from her own spiraling guilt. Dani and Naomi lingered in the corridor, hesitating to cross into that fractured sanctuary. Every instinct urged Dani forward her loyalty to Bill, her desire to shield him from further pain, yet something held her back. She pressed a hand to the cool metal of the railing, fingers tightening into a fist as she wrestled with compassion and resentment. Naomi hovered at her mother's side, eyes red-rimmed but clear. She ached for Bill's suffering, yet watched Hayley's sobs with something like pity. The lie had been exposed. Now the shattered pieces lay scattered, and none of them knew how to gather the shards into anything resembling hope. Night deepened around the building, and finally, a doctor emerged to review Bill's chart. He confirmed what Dani already feared, that Bill's physical recovery would be arduous, that stress and heartbreak could imperil his fragile health. Dani nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. She offered no words of comfort to Hayley, who would not receive them, but simply stood sentinel until the physician moved on. Only then did she turn away, pulling Naomi gently by the elbow. They walked in silence through the hushed halls, footsteps echoing like distant memories. Outside, rain slicked the pavement under streetlights that cast halos of yellow on the wet asphalt. Naomi leaned against the hospital's stone facade, breath cooling in the damp air. "Do you think he'll be okay?" she whispered. Dani closed her eyes, recalling the fear that had gripped her when Bill's life first hung in the balance. "He's a fighter," she replied softly. "But this hurts deeper than any wound." Naomi nodded, tucking damp strands of hair behind her ear. "I just wish things could go back to how they were," she said, tears glinting at the corners of her eyes. Before all this, Dani reached out, pulling her daughter into a hug that spoke of shared sorrow and unspoken promises of protection. Meanwhile, inside the room, Hayley lifted her head at the sound of the door sliding shut. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing aside loose strands of hair. The tears had run dry, leaving her face streaked with lines of anguish. She drew in a ragged breath and spoke into the hollow quiet. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she murmured, touching the folds of the blankets as though seeking reassurance. I was terrified. But when she raised her eyes to the empty window across from the bed, she saw only her reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, haunted by the lie she'd spun. The false heartbeat that had once offered hope now beat only in her memory. Determination sprang suddenly within her. She rose unsteadily, gathering her purse and jacket. She would leave before Bill awoke again, before she could see the pain in his eyes reborn. If she vanished, perhaps the shock would dull, the memory of deception fade. Or maybe, in time, she could find a way to make amends. She would return every favor, confess every misstep, sacrifice everything if only to prove that love could endure beyond deceit. With one last glance at Bill's pale form, she slipped from the room, closing the door softly behind her. In the days that followed, Bill's convalescence was overshadowed by the echo of Hayley's absence. Nurses noted his pallor and reluctance to eat. Visitors whispered concern when he refused flowers or well wishes. Dani took on the role of caregiver without fanfare, arriving each morning with homemade broth and reading material, staying until evening light waned. At times, Bill relaxed in her company, discussing mundane things, Naomi's school projects, old family recipes, even the weather's unpredictable shifts. Yet, every question about Hayley stung like salt in an open wound. He would tense and look away, as though the mention of her name summoned the phantom of her betrayal. Naomi joined her father in the afternoons, leaning against his bed to share gossip from high school, stories of friends and classrooms. She knocked over Sudoku puzzles that Bill tackled with half-hearted interest, their shared laughter fleeting ghosts of a happier past. Sometimes, when she brought up Hayley, asking whether he wished Hayley would visit, or if he'd tried calling, Bill would shrug her off. "I need time," he'd say. "I'm not ready." Naomi's heart ached for both of them, for Bill, stranded in limbo, for Hayley out there alone, guilt gnawing at her spirit. Hayley's journey was one of shadows and whispers. She found refuge in a small rented room at the edge of town, boxes of belongings still unopened in the corner. She spent hours wandering the rain-slick streets, head bowed beneath an umbrella, each footstep a penance. At night, she lay awake, mind replaying every stolen moment, the tenderness of Bill's hand in hers, the flush on his cheeks when she whispered news of the baby, the vulnerable hope in his gaze. She ached to tell him the full truth, that her fear of abandonment had pushed her to fabricate this miracle, that beneath the lie lay a heartbreak of her own. But what words could bridge the gulf of hurt? One evening, fueled by desperation, she sought counsel. A friend from college DR. Elise Morgan agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe. Elise, a counselor by trade, listened without judgment as Hayley poured out her story. Tears fell freely, each one a testament to regret. Elise stirred a cup of herbal tea before speaking. "You've done something cruel," she said gently. "You wounded someone you love. But cruelty born of fear can be met with understanding. The question is, are you ready to face the consequences and to accept whatever forgiveness may come?" Hayley nodded, voice cracking. "I have to try," she whispered. "I can't keep running." So they devised a plan, a letter of confession, delivered to the hospital, acknowledging the full extent of her lie and an appeal for a chance to heal the rift she'd torn open. Meanwhile, Dani and Naomi returned home each evening to the quiet of the Hamilton house. The halls seemed emptier than before, as though Bill's absence had hollowed out its heart. Dani found herself restless at night, replaying memories of her life with Bill, their wedding day, the first time they held newborn Naomi, the late-night talks under starlit skies. She wondered if forgiveness was possible, if love could bloom anew after such a betrayal. She watched Naomi, her eyes still haunted by the confrontation, unpack her school bag, attempting homework that fell onto the floor in erratic piles. Mother and daughter shared a meal in silence, each lost in their own sorrow. On a crisp morning trimmed with sunlight, a plain envelope arrived at the hospital's front desk. The nurse recognized the handwriting and paused, heart tightening. She handed it to Dani, whose name was scrawled across the front in neat, determined letters. Dani recognized the tremor in the script. She carried it to Bill's room, slipping inside where he lay staring into the pale morning light. She handed him the envelope wordlessly and stepped aside as he broke the seal. His voice was soft when he read the first lines. A gasp caught in his throat as he realized the words came from Hayley. The letter spilled truth in black ink, admissions of fear and shame, apologies deep as oceans, the reasons behind the fabrication. She described nights spent awake, haunted by the thought of losing his love, convinced that a child's bond would hold him to her side. She pleaded for understanding, acknowledging that she had no right to entrap him, and offered her life as testimony to her remorse. She begged only for the chance to speak in person. Bill's hands shook as he finished the final sentence. He folded the letter carefully, smoothing creases as though seeking to iron out the wrinkles of their shared pain. Dani watched in silence, knowing that this letter could become either the first step toward healing or another wound in the bedrock of trust. Bill looked up, eyes rimmed with tears he did not shed. "She wants to see me," he said simply. Dani nodded, relief and fear warring in her chest. "If you're ready," she said, voice low, "I'll tell her you'll meet." He closed his eyes, summoning a steadiness that felt foreign. "I'm not ready," he whispered, voice cracking. "But I will. I have to know why." And with that, he breathed deeply, reaching for the resolve that would carry him into confrontation once more this time, armed not with accusations, but with the slim hope of forgiveness. Naomi found her father gazing out the window that afternoon, the letter crumpled on the bedside table. She slipped inside, settling onto the edge of his bed. "Are you going to see her?" she asked, hesitating. Bill nodded, closing his eyes. "Yes," he said. "I need to hear her say it herself." Naomi hesitated, remembering the tears, the anger, and the storm of revelations. But she also remembered Hayley's gentle moments with her father reading bedtime stories, guiding him through exercises when his strength faltered. She placed a hand on Bill's arm. "I'll go with you," she offered. He opened his eyes in surprise. "Only if you want to," he said. Naomi smiled softly. "I want him to see that not everyone thinks she's a monster," she said. "And maybe I do, too, if she's sorry enough." The day of the meeting dawned gray and still. Bill was wheeled to a small consultation room reserved for private conversations. Dani and Naomi waited outside, hearts pounding. Hayley arrived a moment later, dressed in muted colors, hands folded before her. Her eyes were red and swollen, but held a fragile glimmer of hope. She paused in the doorway, drawing a breath as if bracing against the tempest of emotions within. Bill watched her enter. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The years they'd shared, the love that had bound them, pressed upon the cramped space. Finally, Bill spoke, voice low but steady. "Why?" he asked simply. Hayley swallowed, stepping forward. "Because I was afraid," she said. "Afraid you'd leave me once you were well. Afraid that without this child to anchor you, you'd go back to Dani and Naomi and find me unworthy." She raised her chin, courage brimming. "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting our future, but I ruined our present." Bill's gaze softened as understanding dawned, mingled with hurt. "Do you know how it felt?" he asked. "To see hope reborn in her eyes? To imagine a family growing again only to realize it was built on lies." His voice cracked. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Silence fell, thick and resonant. Hayley closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I only want a chance to earn it." Bill looked at her, measuring every line of her face, every tremor in her hands. Slowly, he nodded. "A chance," he echoed. "But it won't be easy." She inclined her head, relief and sorrow mingling in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes." Outside the room, Dani and Naomi waited, hands clasped, breath held. When Bill finally emerged, he offered a small nod toward Hayley. Dani exhaled, tears pricking her lashes. "Thank you," she whispered both to Bill and to the delicate possibility of reconciliation. As the four of them stood in that corridor, faces drawn, hearts wary but alight with fragile hope, the future seemed both daunting and beckoning. The lie that had shattered their world lay exposed, but in its aftermath, the roots of something truer could yet take hold, a family tested by betrayal, navigating the treacherous path toward trust. Whether they would reach the end together or drift apart in the currents of hurt remained to be seen. But in that moment, as they stepped forward into an uncertain dawn, each carried within them the seeds of redemption and the promise that even beyond the gates of deception, new beginnings could bloom.